Hi, everybody. Cassy Adams here with the ALS Association. We are here again for another live educational series, and thanks everybody for tuning in and joining us today, especially when it's absolutely beautiful outside, and I don't blame you if you're also out playing in the park. So I'm excited. Dear friend and colleague Rebecca Hobbs-Lawrence is with us today. I'll let Rebecca introduce herself a little bit more, but she has willingly come on today to talk a little bit about supporting young people during difficult times, whether that's ALS, COVID-19, or the combination thereof. So just as a couple of housekeeping things for those who are tuning in live today, we certainly encourage you to chat in any questions or comments or things that you'd like us to address in the comment box on Facebook, or you can email us if you're watching us online. We are going to go ahead and do our very best to answer those questions for you today. And if we don't get to those questions, then we will definitely respond to them later. So appreciate you connecting in with us. So a little bit about Rebecca, and then I'll turn it over to her. So Rebecca is a Pathways Program and Grief Services Coordinator with the Dougy Center, which is a nonprofit here in the Portland area. And Rebecca has been extremely involved in supporting the ALS community through her programs with the Dougy Center, but also joining us for family days for goodness, how many years now? 5, 6?
5,
yeah,
I think.
Quite a few. So Rebecca has been really, really instrumental in helping to create materials for our chapter to help support young people, and just really being a wonderful advocate and support. So appreciate you being on today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you. Yeah, you kind of shared what I do, but with Pathways, just so people know that is our program at the Dougy Center that supports families, kids, teens, and their adults during an advanced serious illness, such as ALS. And that way they all have opportunities to be with peers who are also going through a similar experience, kind of normalizing their experience and just helping them feel not so alone.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So I think, one of the big questions that I've been hearing a lot coming up for families who are already affected by ALS and some who are not is just kind of how can families support young people in dealing just with kind of the unknown environment that we're in right now? And I think this kind of goes, for COVID, but also for ALS, is there's so much that's unknown in that world. It's a hard question to ask.
No, it will, and it's just a complicated question because there are so many changes. And like you said, with an ALS diagnosis, that already starts, a kind of a roller coaster ride of changes and plateaus already for the family, right? And so, with ALS, there might be some swift changes that families respond to and kind of feel like they get the ground back under their feet and feel like things might be feeling kind of like a new normal again, and before another change happens, right? So there's maybe a little breathing room in between some of those changes, both for the kids and adults. And what the COVID-19 kind of crisis has done is put on top of that this completely whatever grounding was under your feet, for those short periods of time is gone now, right? And there's so many unknowns. Everything feels very unpredictable, and all of our routines are changed. So both kids and adults are really responding in a way with a lot of anxiety, often feeling very overwhelmed to these constant changes. So I think the first things that's really important is providing clear information to kids and teens, both around the ALS diagnosis and changes that might be happening because of it, and also then clear information around school, around what's happening with that, what's happening with things that they're going to be opening up again. So there has to be like conversations, clear information. That's just so important. And then one of the biggest things is routines, Cassie, because, you know, for kids and teens, whether they liked it or not, school was their primary, you know, grounding space that was predictable and known. Whether, like I said, whether you hated school or loved it or everything in between, right? It was a known, and you knew what you were going to do when you went to school that day. You knew when lunch was. You knew which friends you were going to connect with, which teachers you would see, and that has all been taken away from kids and teens. And like even the kids and teens that did not like school are really stressed out right now, not having that. And just to be really aware for them that that really primary space for them to go and be away from family, away from ALS, away from everything else that was and its grounding for them is no longer there. So really is trying to identify some new routines for them if they haven't already. And I know that's can be really challenging because we're all kind of struggling right now. But as an adult, thinking about what routines, as you know, for you as a parent or a grandparent or guardian, is important for you to see the children and teens having. And then asking them also, well, what is important for you? So one routine that might be important that my son and I have negotiated on, right, is that it's really important for him to be on his PS4 and be able to connect with his friends. And so that is a place where I can say, okay, every mid-morning after homework, you can go and do that. He knows he's going to have that time. I don't take it away from him. I've just given it to him as a routine now. And it allows them time to connect and do something known. Also, bookend routines. It's really important for all of us to have those kind of morning and nighttime rituals that help us get up in the morning and say, okay, day, here I come, you know, and then also be able to help us decompress at night a little bit and get ready for bed. It helps us sleep better, you know, it helps us kind of put the day's stuff away. And it might be reading a book. It might be, for me, it's Sudoku. Mornings for kids, it might be simple activities like a quick little book or a fun, like a show they watch for 20 minutes or whatever it is, but just those knowns. We need to have things that are predictable and known for us because life is so unpredictable right now. So that's really important. And the other thing too is helping your kids and teens identify healthy coping strategies for when they are anxious and things are changing. And it's best to do those when we're not in the midst of a crisis, but, you know, just to be able to say, well, when you feel anxious, what's something that has helped in the past, you know, and when you're worrying about something a lot, what is something that has helped? And if they're like, I don't know, then come up with some ideas. What about for littler kids? Do you have a stuffed animal? Do you have a blanket to put over you? Do you have a distraction that you can use for a little while? And I think that's great for us as adults to know too. What are our coping strategies that we can use? Because it's great to let our kids and teens know, but you know, it's helpful if we're using them and we're role modeling them also. Absolutely.
That is such great information. Jumping back to something that you said at the very beginning, that I hear, you know, very valid concern from a lot of families is, you know, being really clear and open and upfront about ALS, but also about COVID. I think there's a really reasonable fear that I'm going to overwhelm my kids even more. There's always so much going on in the media and, you know, with the news on and everything else. Yeah. So I'm curious what your thoughts are and how to be clear, but also how to be sensitive and not overwhelm.
Right. I think the first thing is finding information that's very reliable. around COVID. There's so much misinformation and mixed information. And so if kids and teens are only talking to their friends, they're going to get a real mishmash of something that's not going to be very helpful for them. I looked it up. The ALS national website has some great COVID information also. There's some links in the information, the resource page that is going to be attached to this that also has some great COVID information. So making sure that there is reliable information that you can give them. So that's the first and foremost thing. I think the other piece around just feeling really overwhelmed is being able to figure out really, like, again, before a crisis happens, always good, but really having them be able to talk to you. And not all kids and teens are able to talk to their adults. So then how do you support them when they are overwhelmed and how they are stressed out? And so you can have all the best information in the world, but if you can't share it or they're not listening to you share it, you know, which tends to be even more so like, no, or, you know, then that's not helpful. So making sure that you're able to really connect with kids, whether they're your kids, your grandkids, you know, who are those special young people in your life that you're supporting, is really being able to let them know that you really are listening to them. And often we have to kind of do some makeup work too when things get really, really stressed out, because if they haven't developed or had one and kind of gave up this relationship of coming to you when things are hard, right? You're going to have to rebuild that a little bit. And it feels overwhelming for adults during a crisis to have to do that too. But it's actually pretty simple. And that is, start really listening to them and talking with them about the small things in their life first. You know, if you can engage in those things, the shows they like to watch on TV, the games they like to play, and really be interested in those things, and the movies they want to watch, you know, and talk about the characters. Why do you like that character? And then they know that you're listening to them. Then they will start opening up about the bigger things also that are happening in their life too. You can't expect them just to dive right in to big stuff when they don't trust that you're actually going to be listening to them. I think another thing too, as adults, we often have to stop. My son is really good about telling me, like, whoa, put the brakes on. You know, it's like,
too much.
You know, well, and it's like, are we hearing them to respond to them, to fix something, or are we really listening to them? And, you know, as soon as I start talking and I go into fix it mode in some way, or like, this is what, and he just like, he puts his hands up, he's like, no. So I don't know if I trained him well or not, you know, but it's a good reminder for me that to be able to slow it down and to really be able to, again, just listen. So much anxiety and stress can be diffused for somebody when they feel like they're connecting with somebody and being heard. You know, just that connection kind of goes, we take that breath. And so that in itself is a gift, even when you're not fixing anything. So just to remind us as parents, is we don't have to know it all, or grandparents, that if we can just be with them so that they feel like they're being acknowledged and heard, that is going to help a lot. And then to ask them, what do you need from me? Like, how can I help you best? Do you need to figure out options and what they are? Do you want to kind of think about different solutions and what they might look like? Like, how can I best help you right now? And that's empowering too. And you're helping them find their own answers with your guidance and your experience and, you know, all of that too.
Well, I can see how so much of that can really translate to, you know, parent or grandparents' interaction with their kids or young people around ALS as well. You know, there's the same unknowns and the same, I think most of us come into situations wanting to make things better, wanting to fix, wanting to support and help in that way. And yet there are so many things that we just have to sit with ALS that we can't fix, that we can't change. So I can see how all of that really translates well. Something that I've heard you talk about before at family days or just in connecting with families is also just the resiliency of young people.
Yes.
And how sometimes I think as adults, we feel like we might give them too much information when we're trying to be really clear about like an ALS diagnosis or what is COVID, what is this, because we don't want to frighten them. But I've heard you talk about, just how resilient young people are and how important it is for them to hear that, because often they'll imagine the worst situation if we as adults don't take that those conversations.
Oh my God. Yeah, that is so true, Cassie. And I mean, to think about as an adult, like for us, all these unknowns and how that creates anxiety, and we want something known. So if we can give to somebody else something known, something factual, honest and clear information. And for kids, there might be some stress around that information. I'm not going to say it goes easily and, there's no bumps along the way, but kids will imagine the worst thing. And so anything you give them is always going to be better than that, than the worst case scenario in that way. And once it has a name, then you can talk about it. You can create coping strategies around it. You can identify your feelings that you're having around it. But when it's still so unknown and mysterious, you can't grab at things in the dark. And so it is. Kids are incredibly resilient if you help them have that information, those coping strategies, those things that we talk about all the time. And they're kind of just foundational, but they're so important.
Yeah. I think we're all feeling, for those who are maybe working from home or staying at home, and for, of course, our young people who are at home now doing school at home, there's a lot of together time.
Lots of together time.
I'm curious what your thoughts are for dealing with that together time in positive ways, and potentially even some like silver linings that could maybe come out of this for families.
Right. I was talking with some families the other day in our Pathways group, and they were talking about this together time, this too much together time. And then one of the families said, we had all this too much together time, and then we all went to our rooms, and now we don't see each other at all the last couple of weeks. And so I think, there is this place of like, once it gets too much of anything and it's too hard, it's the same old, then you revert back to something different, which is isolation often, which isn't good either. We don't want either of those extremes, right? I think the real key is because we're all stressed and worried and anxious, we have forgotten how to have some fun. And it can't, and we know it can't be every day. There's a lot of things we're attending to. Just the day-to-day logistics of our world is challenging, but needing to make some fun time is so important. And I think often too, especially if you have adolescents or teens, adults are so often like, oh, they don't want to have any fun. We're not going to do that. They don't want to do it. So you know what? You never know. So last week in the Pathways group, and our families were talking about what are they doing to make some fun time. And because we posted a sheet to them around fun things for families during COVID, which I think you have also. So they were coming up with their own. One was a talent show. And they were doing lip syncing, singing songs. There was one of the kids did a dance routine, and the parent who has been diagnosed, and has more challenges right now, they did a little sit in their chair comic routine, like jokes and things. So they had their own family talent show that they recorded.
Oh, fun.
awesome, which we'll talk about in a second, does a secondary thing, but they're having all this fun in the moment, right? Which is great. And then another family that I talked to, they did a dress up as somebody famous and come to dinner. So they made a dinner for the family, and these were teenagers, three of them.
Wow.
They were teenagers with their, adults, and they all dressed up as somebody famous and had dinner together as those famous people.
I love it.
Isn't that great? Another had littler kids. They did. They weren't going to be going to Legoland this summer, and so they all created their own Lego creations and spent a couple days doing that. And then they put them up on their end tables and dining room table and stuff, and had like a gallery showing of Lego creations.
How creative. That is so
Right?
creative.
So I think it's really like getting outside of the box. Nice weather right now. I mean, going out, even if it's not an overnight, but pretend like you're having a camp, you're camping in the backyard and singing songs and telling stories and having camp food and s'mores. And, I think we just need to do something that's different. And we also need to schedule it. So often we talk about these fun things in a way that's like, oh, that sounds great, we should do it. And then we don't do it. So with some flexibility, right? Like, but to be able to actually put it on the calendar. So I think that is incredibly helpful. And I think I said, this kind of the secondary piece of this is you're getting out of this rut and doing something fun in this, time you're together a lot, but you're also creating memories. And those memories are going to last for a long time then. So it's like a twofold. You're having this amazing time in the moment, doing something different with your family and laughing, enjoying each other, and you're creating something that they'll be able to cherish much further on. So when you talk about that silver lining, that it is there. We have to help it a little bit and make it happen, but it's definitely there.
Such a good point, because I think a lot of, I keep hearing people refer to life right now as Groundhog Day, and it's kind of the same day over and over again, not a lot of variety. But you're right. We have to take kind of that ownership of moving some of those plans forward and definitely thinking outside the box.
Yes.
So for those who are tuning in, Rebecca's mentioned a handout that she's put together for all of you that's kind of attached there. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about some of the other resources that you included onto that handout?
On that handout there, so there's some information about just COVID information, like I said. There is information about family fun. That some of the things, you never know what will strike your fancy right that way. And there's also a piece that we haven't really talked about, but especially for adults it's so important, kids too, but having 3 minutes to relax even. So there's some links in there to computer things that if you're having to work at home in any way, taking a break for even 3 minutes and accessing one of those just to relax can be hugely beneficial. So there's those, and then there's 2 activities that have also been attached. And one is a family quarantine interview, which we send to our Pathways families. And then the other one is from our Pathways Family Ties book, and that is the kind of like memory box. And I think what's so amazing maybe about this time too is that this might be just the opportunity to create a time capsule for families for so many reasons, right? But you have this moment right now, and to make the most of it. And what do you want to remember about this time? What do you both for kids and adults? And being able to write letters, there's newspaper articles, there's fun things you create to put them in a time capsule. And when I was a kid, we buried them in the backyard, but I think putting them up on the top shelf of the closet is just as good.
You don't have to remember where you buried it.
Right? Put on their time capsule, what year. But it also creates, again, having the fun now, but then also creating this legacy kind of piece for later on of where we were in our life during that time and, what's important.
I love that idea because we really are making history right now. This is really an interesting time in our lives. Yeah, but thank you so much. Those are such great ideas. I'll also just mention, and we can post this in the link afterwards, that we have some really good resources also on our website for young people, some lists of some books that you might want to check out. And Rebecca's been really huge in helping to develop some guides that we have available for families and for young people, and just kind of how to support connecting with young people, but also teens. And our national office actually put out some really neat materials a couple of years ago that we have available. We have a graphic novel that's available for teens, and some other kind of age appropriate materials. So if anybody is interested in any of that, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to help get that out to you. Rebecca, you started talking about it a little bit, and you mentioned the Pathways program kind of at the beginning, but for those who are maybe just now tuning in, do you mind just kind of briefly describing what that program is and kind of
Sure.
what it's looking like right now?
Yeah, we've morphed with everybody else. But about 5.5 years ago, we started our Pathways program. So it is a peer support group that is for families living with what we call an advanced serious illness. So ALS, advanced cancer. We've had some advanced, like early onset Alzheimer's as well, and a few other things. I think ALS and cancer tend to be the primary diagnoses of that group. And we have a group for kids, a group for teens, adolescents and teens, a group for the adult caregivers, and then a group for the adults that have been diagnosed also. It is a group for kids and teens who primarily it's a parent or a sibling that has been diagnosed, or a grandparent if the grandparent has been a primary caregiver for the young person. And it's wraparound family support. So, in the past, they've all come to their group and they're all getting support from their peers, people who are seeing that experience from their perspective in that way, which has been amazing. Because of COVID-19, we have moved to online support. Mm-hmm. And so each of those groups have their own online peer support group now. And it's been incredible. It's been so well received by them. And just the fact that every 2 weeks they're still getting that connection with each other, where they can talk with people who get it. Even the 5 and 6 year olds are so cute with it. And the teens who often balk at everything have found it, and they're kind of getting zoomed out even, that they have really dedicated themselves to coming on and being there to support each other. So yeah, it's been incredible. I do foresee that we will stay with it being online, for a while, because we want to make sure that our most, vulnerable people are safe. So
great.
Yeah.
And we can go ahead and connect anybody who is interested in learning more about the program with Rebecca. And she's such a wonderful asset to the ALS community and helping make this available. It's really means a lot.
Oh, thank you.
Well, believe it or not, we've actually been talking for half an hour. Our time is
really?
I know, time flies. But I appreciate all that you've shared, and there's probably so many more things that we could talk about. But I really appreciate just the support that you've offered today, and just some of the ideas for families, because it's a lot that people are dealing with right now, and a lot of unknowns. So it's nice to reassure that some good routines and support are really paramount for all humans, I think.
Everybody.
Absolutely.
And you said something too, Cassie, and I try to sometimes it's helpful to think about the larger picture. It's so hard day to day when it's the same that we stay focused on the minutia of things. And it's helpful when we can get out into the bigger picture. And so I think one of the things that I think is important too, when you were saying about making history, we were talking about the time capsule. And if we can kind of have this bigger perspective that we're making history, and what do we want to say about that, you know, in the larger context, but also in our family context of, you know, I even think about myself, like, what do I want my grandchildren to be able to say, like, you know, how I did with this and what I taught them. So when we can, you know, all those skills that we talk about, but that sense of resiliency and being flexible in a really hard time when we really want what's known, you know, and patience, you know, developing patience that things don't always go the way we want it to. And what do we do? I think those are incredibly wonderful gifts to be able to pass on to.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, it's always a pleasure, Rebecca, talking with you. Thanks so much for coming on. And for those who may not have asked a question or made a comment, please, after this is done being live, if there's anything that we can help with or answer questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and we're happy to help. For those who have been following these, we are going to be doing another educational live event on June 4th at 3 p.m. And we'll have Reva Barwell come talk about nutrition and ALS and a little bit about dining health and kind of what that means. So I hope you'll tune in then. Rebecca, thanks again. Really
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Cassie.
All right, everybody, take care.